Hello, I'm Anthony. One of the challenges musicians face, and that I basically wrestle with on an ongoing basis, is how to keep the process fresh. Because the moment you get bored of writing music, you're going to be pretty bad at it, and then eventually you're going to stop because what you're producing is bad. So today I want to talk about how I go about trying to keep the thing interesting and vary my approach as much as possible. And I'm going to use the last 4 years of my YouTube experience. I launched this YouTube channel a little over 4 years ago now, and I'm going to talk about the music that I've written over the past 4 years and how it falls into 4 different categories. I've called it the 4 faces of music. Hope you enjoy this video today. Check out the Patreon and channel member links below if you'd like to support my channel so that I can carry on making this content. Now, regular viewers of my channel will know that I love me a good spreadsheet, so I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to make a new one. Here we've got effectively a roadmap of my songwriting in the past 4 years. And I found it really interesting once I'd done this to look back and basically draw a picture of my psychological profile over the last 4 years, because it walks hand in hand with the music that I write. The first kind of song I want to talk about today is the fully fledged song. Guitars, keyboards, drums, everything that you can imagine, and lyrics most importantly, that comprise a song. When I first launched my channel, that was completely where my head was at. I was very enthusiastic about playing the electric guitar. That featured in all of the songs that I wrote. My wife Pauline had only recently agreed to sing on my songs. One of the big hurdles I'd faced up until that point was, well, I can't sing worth a damn, so what was I going to do? How can I write songs? Pauline has an incredible voice. We just never really considered the possibility of her singing my songs. When she agreed to do that and I started writing songs for her to sing, everything just fell into place, and it seemed like serendipitous that I was supposed to set up a YouTube channel talking about that journey. So jumping right back to the beginning, this big green chunk here, green essentially represents a fully featured song. I'll play you a couple of examples as I'm talking about each of the different kinds of song that I like to write and the different kinds of processes that go into them and how I'm able to keep it fresh. The idea of the green song, the guitar-based song, is that it is a very full, very rich sound that's specifically tailored to showcase Pauline's talents as a singer, but also really stretch my legs. Here's a very small example of the kind of thing and the fullness of sound that I'm trying to reach when I'm in this kind of mood. Lots of harmonies, lovely bass. Try to get that rhythm as good as possible. I mean, rhythm is something that I really struggle with because I can't play live drums. So trying to make them sound natural and organic is incredibly difficult. The tasteful use of guitar without splattering it all over the song and being completely over the top. All of those components occasionally come together. That little excerpt of music that I played you there is from one of my favourite songs called Shades of Blue, because I think it strikes that really good balance of not being pretentious, not being overblown, everything is in its right place, and it just really hangs together very well as a song. The problem with those kinds of songs, those really fully featured pieces of music with tons of instrumentation, or, well, exactly the right amount of instrumentation to do that job, is that they're just unbelievably difficult. At the very top of the difficulty tree for me is lyric writing. So the moment I set out to write lyrics, I'm immediately consigning myself to hour upon hour of staring at a blank page in torture. So every time I do that, it is kind of an emotionally exhausting, sounds a bit cheesy, doesn't it? But it really wrings it out of me, and I find it very, very difficult. Furthermore, doing that without being cheesy and pretentious is also very difficult, because I don't really like to write trite or pointless lyrics, and yet the moment you try to say anything, it just sounds like I don't know, you're 13-year-old angst-ridden kind of teenager. So that whole process is very challenging to me, and at the beginning I basically dived in feet first, and as you can see, for a long period of time, a good couple of years, that was my primary focus. as I was growing the channel, and I discovered that as I was writing songs, it was constantly throwing up new and interesting things to talk about. Now, during this period of my music composition process, I made a lot of videos entitled Back on Track, where each of these songs has a Back on Track series associated with them, and I talk about that songwriting process and really tried to understand at a cellular level what I was doing and how I was succeeding, how I was failing, and how I could improve. So I think from the perspective of learning your chops as a songwriter, doing the full kind of popular music symphony, if you like, stretching it as far as you can and using all of the instruments, that's really where you're going to learn the most. But by the same token, it's also the most difficult. So occasionally, as a palate cleanser, during this process, I would pick up my acoustic guitar and throw all of that nonsense away and just play the acoustic guitar. Now, this is essentially the second phase that I want to talk about today, because acoustic guitar songwriting is a completely different process for me. When I'm writing a song that's based on the electric guitar, it's all about the end product, and I don't care how I get there. I have been known to individually paste single guitar notes together to make a solo that's too fast for me to play naturally. You could call it cheating if you want, but I don't mind kind of using those technical aids to get the song written, because the song is the most important thing. When I'm writing an acoustic piece, however, I have a slightly different focus. I try to make it a far more performance-oriented piece. Let's pull up one of these so that I can show you an example of what I'm talking about. So here's River Run. This is the first acoustic guitar piece that I recorded after launching the channel. And probably the most important point from the perspective of these different faces that you wear as a songwriter to think about when I'm writing an acoustic piece is that the acoustic piece drives the entire song, even to the extent of the tempo track. I don't record an acoustic guitar performance using a click track. So here you can see basically an inferred tempo track that I've manually input after I've played the guitar in. So what we have here is a much simpler project. Even though there's plenty of tracks, the majority of them are group tracks. There's really not much going on here at all. Looks like there's tons of guitars. There aren't. They're all just very simple layers of a similar kind of thing. So this is a much more pared down experience, and I use these as, did I say palette cleanser earlier? That's the way I like to think about them. When I'm just getting overwhelmed with the weight of having to write a full song, doing something like this is a really nice, fresh kind of breath of air. I've still got the trauma of trying to put lyrics over the top of it. I'm never going to escape that torture. But the process of sitting down and actually playing the guitar as a performance piece, I find really pleasurable. And I'll generally spend anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks learning a piece, but basically writing it as I'm getting my finger chops back up. Very often having to rebuild the calluses that I've allowed to go soft. It's a nightmare as a guitarist. The moment you stop playing for any length of time, you can't play properly again until you've rebuilt your calluses. So the idea with these is that they're a much more natural and organic performance and allow me to explore a completely different aspect of songwriting. Writing these acoustic pieces is something that I find very relaxing, actually.
Painted from memory when days were long, lazy and carefree, drunk on mist and rhyme.
So I've yet to write an acoustic piece that has more than a couple of instruments behind it, because I really want that to be the center, the focus, the vocals and the guitar together. I mean, how lucky am I to have access to a voice like that? So I don't want to bury it in a ton of overblown effects. It's all about me sat with my guitar. I mean, Pauline doesn't sing live as I'm performing it, but it feels like that's a duet performance. I realise we've been far too long without the spreadsheet. Let's get the spreadsheet back. Far too few pink bars. These are the acoustic songs. And it's very significant that recently the last 2 pieces of music that I've written have both been acoustic pieces. I'm loving playing the acoustic guitar at the moment. And the more I do it, obviously, it kind of goes without saying, the more you do something, effortful study results in improved performance. And that whole effortful thing is really important. If I pick up the acoustic guitar to practice, I don't have the telly on in the background. I don't have any distractions. I sit down and I really try to play every note as well as I possibly can. Get those fingers right behind the frets, make those notes sound as clear and crystal as possible, so that ultimately when I come to do the performance, I've built up some sort of muscle memory. So this is a completely different thing. Writing an acoustic song is totally different as far as I'm concerned from writing a song, kind of a more band-oriented piece of music. And when I start getting tired of one, I can put it down and pick the other one up. The fourth phase of music that I want to talk about, and I have to talk about this before we get on to number 4, is the album. So down at the bottom here, we have this long purple streak. Around the beginning of 2022, I kind of crystallized my intentions to write an album. It's always been an ambition of mine, but I finally settled on, this is it, this is what I'm going to do. And I remember very clearly when I first came up for the riff, which ultimately became River Song, I knew that that needed to be the beginning of an album. The piece of music just lent itself to being the beginning of an album. And so I settled in, very determined to do that. Here's me writing River Song, and at that time was when I started putting together everything that was going to be the album. So lots of these songs that had been written over the previous couple of years came together to make this thing. Some of them weren't in an album fit state, and so I had to go back and rework them. I'll mention reworking a little bit later because that's kind of interesting in its own right, but all of these chunks over here are me going back and either reworking or remastering songs to get them ready to fit into the album. So this thing is basically the culmination of my entire musical life. This was the be-all and end-all when I was doing that thing. And when I finally released it in February of 23, I was absolutely spent. I didn't spend any time. I tried actually starting one other piece of music while I was putting the album together. And it's a grey bar because it just got abandoned. I wasn't really interested in doing anything other than this. And my one attempt, the only completely abandoned song in this spreadsheet, there is another grey block. That's a separate thing. It's a song that I've started and fully intend to finish, just haven't got around to it yet. Now, the thing with putting an album together is that I really wanted it to be a cohesive piece of music. It didn't necessarily need to be Pink Floyd's The Wall. I'm not interested in doing that thing, but I did want it to be completely cohesive. And actually, the one album that I had in mind when I was writing it that I wanted to try to emulate as much as possible was an album by Paul Weller called Wildwood. If you've never heard it before, you're missing out. You need to go and hear it. It's absolutely unbelievable. And it has a complete consistency and sense of kind of integrity to it, with these beautiful little instrumental moments that tie songs together in just the most magical way. It's a really amazing piece of art. And I use that as a template to try to build my album. Okay, so here's the album project. And as you can see, 9 songs on the album. And in fact, we're actually just finishing off Shades of Blue, which we heard a little excerpt from earlier. So I had great fun with these interludes coming out of the songs, just writing little connecting instrumentals that would pull the whole thing together. It's another one of those things where trying to do this stuff without ramming it down your throat and being really cheesy is very difficult. But it allowed me to have a much more natural, kind of relaxed approach to songwriting, because now I didn't need to write fully fledged songs. I didn't need to write completed pieces of music. Specifically writing interlude music. And it was really fabulous fun. I picked on this particular interlude because it's the longest of all of the interludes in the song. And I was playing around with Omnisphere and found a few instances of just wonderful sound effects that I just ended up kind of really playing with and trying not to take things too seriously. It is kind of bubbling in the background and difficult to kind of make out. Me talking over the top of it doesn't help. But soundscape and sound design like this is something that I ordinarily wouldn't do in a song itself, because they're really musical vehicles and I like to keep those two ideas quite distinct. But having this idea of fading songs back in and pulling them out again and just playing with atmosphere was wonderful fun. Really, 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 really good fun. I didn't expect that to be a thing. When I started writing the album, I had no idea that I was going to kind of just play in that direction, but actually found it enormously enjoyable. The problem is that the process of writing the album itself absolutely did me. I remember finishing it and saying I might very well never do that again, because it took the best part of a year and just completely took over my working life. You know, this is what I do for a living these days, and I just couldn't think about anything else. So this hugely feverish endeavor ended up just wiping me out of songwriting. And the reason why you see so little green after this is because I just needed to do something else. So I needed to find a new expression for, if I wanted to still write music and be creative, but I just needed to put that thing down for a while, the songwriting. So what was I going to do next? So phase number 4 is electronic music. And from this point onwards, as you can see, lots and lots of electronic pieces that didn't have lyrics, probably most importantly, actually, because, as I've said multiple times, that's the hardest thing for me. So just to put that aside and not have the pressure of have to write lyrics was really important for me. But also it just lets me have fun in a completely different domain yet again. Now I'm wallowing in the joy of plugins and playing with different sounds and loading presets and playing around with them and just having much more kind of technical fun. Okay, so here's one of my electronic pieces. We have a bass line, but it's entirely electronic. I recorded a Chapman stick line, and every single track on this piece is VST laden. There isn't a single live instrument to be had anywhere. So it's all about just finding great sounds, solo, any individual track. Who knew VST plugins sound great? You know, it's not really news, is it? But all of these instruments, what was that? That was Hallian doing that job. Just fantastic tools that sound awesome in their own right, trying to plug all of those things together and build this kind of sound palette, I suppose, of all of the different sounds, mix them all together, and it's a very technical process. I really like the kind of the intense study of building an electronic piece. It doesn't have the emotional resonance of a song, primarily because it doesn't have lyrics, and it doesn't have that kind of lean back and express yourself thing that I might get out of a guitar solo, for instance. But it's another completely different aspect of songwriting that I find stretches totally different muscles. And every time one of these limbs, every time one of these 4 aspects of songwriting kind of fades or becomes tiresome to me, I can pick another one up, and it's like I've discovered it again for the very first time. So I've written one fully finished lyric-based standard normal song in the past couple of years, and there it is. And now I'm just starting to pick up my acoustic songwriting chops again, and I'm really enjoying doing that. Having had this very long season of electronic stuff, I discovered that, oh, that seems to be running out of gas. Okay, let's do something else in the meantime. Finally, circling back around for a quick chat about these reworks, I've come to consider this to be a vital part of the songwriting process. I no longer have any difficulty picking up a song and reworking it and being prepared to throw away whole sections of it. I did it most recently with a song called Mirror Song, which is this little brown chunk over here. That was a song where some of the lyrics I was unhappy with, some of the technical processes that I'd used to record the song, I wasn't happy with them. So I went back and fixed them, and I'm much, much happier with the new version, and I've got no compunction about doing that. In fact, some of these songs that I consider just complete duds, there are songs in this list that I dislike. I haven't written them off forever. I'm perfectly willing to consider the possibility of going in and reworking them, stripping out everything except XYZ. It doesn't really matter what, you know, maybe the drums are fantastic and everything else is rubbish. Throw everything else away, keep the drums and start a brand new song. Why not? But I think this is a nice graphical illustration of do something until you can't or don't want to do it anymore, then do a new thing, and then do a new thing. And it really helps you to maintain that level of interest. If you're not inspired every time you sit down at your chosen musical instrument and you're not really excited to do that next thing, to write that next piece of music, it's just going to be bad. Don't do that. Find a new way to inspire yourself, and that's what I'm constantly doing. I'm constantly finding ways to challenge myself, to be excited about discovering a new thing. At the moment, it's actually acoustic guitar chops, just getting better at playing the acoustic guitar. Not something I've ever been passionately, desperately bothered about. As long as it was good enough to get the song written, that was okay for me. But at the moment, I really am kind of actively enjoying trying very hard to get good at that thing. And that's what's keeping me going. And so we have pink bars down at the bottom of the graph. And that'll do us for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit like if you did. I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.